Welcome to today's press briefing. My name is Garodo Queen. I'm director of the Global Legal Action Network. We are an independent nonprofit organization that takes innovative legal actions against powerful actors involved with human rights abuses, and we are based in the UK. Today I am joined by other panelists who I'll shortly introduce you to. And this briefing will detail the commencement of legal proceedings by Al-Haq with the support of the Global Legal Action Network against the UK after written requests to suspend arms sales to Israel due to grave breaches of international law and UK rules were repeatedly ignored. The file papers, which will be described in greater detail, involve indiscriminate attacks on civilians, destruction of infrastructure critical for their survival, starvation, forced displacement, and, as the UN and other legal experts have recently warned, the risk of genocide. So this filing that we're describing today calls into question the UK's domestic and international legal obligations in light of the atrocity crimes being committed by Israel in Gaza. And like other members of the international community, the UK has a clear obligation to prevent such crimes, including genocide, and should immediately consider all diplomatic, political, and economic measures to do so. Instead, we've seen the authorities greenlight weapons exports to Israel, a side that has committed clear violations of international law, resulting in the deaths of thousands of children. Today, we are joined by Ahmed Abuful, legal researcher and advocacy officer at Al-Haq, who will speak on the international context and obligations of states. We have Siobhan Allen, senior lawyer at the Global Legal Action Network, who will speak on the specifics of our action. And in addition, we are joined by additional panelists, Alora Chowdhury, senior in-house legal counsel from the International Center of Justice for Palestinians, who are supporting our legal work. As well, we have Katie Fallon, advocacy manager at Campaign Against the Arms Trade, who will provide a short message in relation to their work on this issue. And we're also joined by Bushra Khalidi, policy lead for the occupied Palestinian territory at Oxfam, who will also speak on the humanitarian situation and their support for this legal action. Afterwards, we will have plenty of time for questions and answers, and we'll be on hand will be Dervla Minogue, senior lawyer at the Global Legal Action Network, who's been heavily involved with this case, and also Alice Hardy, partner at Bindmans LLP, who are the solicitors firm representing Al-Haq. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Ahmed to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us in this important press briefing on the legal action taken against the UK government. This legal action is taken by the organization that I proudly speak on behalf today, the Ramallah-based Al-Haq, together with our partners, the UK-based Global Legal Action Network, and with support of the International Center of Justice for Palestinians. Today we announced that together with our partners, we will be filing a case against the UK government at the English High Court of Justice. This comes after we have written to the Secretary of State for international trade, asking her to suspend all weapons export licenses to Israel. Under the government's strategic licensing criteria, weapons may not be exported where there is a clear risk that they may be used in violations of international law. My colleagues will speak more about the proceedings in the UK. In our assessment, British weapons were found to be linked to Israel's breaches of international law and the alleged commissions of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possibly genocide, which were perpetrated in Palestine and continue to be perpetrated at this very moment in the Gaza Strip and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. Therefore, the UK government ought to have such weapon export licenses immediately suspended. Notably, the UK government's strategic licensing criteria, which governs the weapon exports, are based on the UK's own legal obligations under international law, including the Arms Trade Treaty. The UK has a legal and a moral obligation not to grant any licenses for the sale of British weapons to regimes that commit atrocity crimes under international law. That the UK has a responsibility also to respect and ensure respect of international humanitarian law, as well as a responsibility to prevent genocide. Selling arms to Israel's settler colonial and apartheid regime not only violates those obligations, but could also give rise to the individual criminal responsibility for certain individuals for aiding, abetting, or otherwise assisting in the commission of these crimes, including by providing a means for its commission, as stipulated by the rules of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The UK has also a historical responsibility when it comes to the situation in Palestine. It is regrettable and utterly reprehensible that the UK continues to contribute to the transgenerational suffering of the Palestinian people, including in the Gaza Strip, by supporting Israel's settler colonialism and apartheid perpetuated against the Palestinian people as a whole. Thousands of Palestinian victims, including children, may be killed at this very moment by British weapons. Notably, coupled with Israel's dangerous genocidal statements, Israel's assault on Gaza and the systematic targeting of protected civilians, mostly women and children, and protected civilian objects, including hospitals, ambulances, schools, bakeries, UNRWA food storages, and water reserves, indicates a deliberate policy of starvation being used as a method of warfare that aims at ethnically cleansing the Palestinians by inducing them to leave the Gaza Strip. These are a series of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation, forced displacement, and persecution. As the Palestinians described it, this is another Nakba, with frequent serious signals of genocide unfolding before our eyes. One must say that this situation did not happen in a vacuum. Rather, this is the result of 75 years of Zionist settler colonialism and apartheid imposed on the Palestinian people as a whole. This is the result of 56 years of Israel's longest in modern history illegal belligerent occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. This is also the result of Israel's 17-year-long suffocating military blockade of one of the most densely populated areas in the world, where 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza live in around 360 square meters. Colleagues, the UK must demonstrate its compliance with its obligations and responsibilities under international law in all situations. There is no place for double standards, selectivity, and hypocrisy in respecting and adhering to the rules of international law. The past months have shown clearly that when there is political will, the UK government is capable of respecting, promoting, and even mobilizing international law to prevent atrocity crimes and to passionately advocate for ensuring accountability and justice for the victims of these crimes. Shamelessly, in this particular situation, this enthusiasm seemed to vanish when addressing the situation in Palestine, the human rights of the Palestinian people, or the rights of Palestinian victims to justice. In conclusion, this legal action, in our view, this legal action against the UK's government comes after the government closed its ears and refused to hear the pleas for humanity and justice from Palestinians, but also from British people who marched the streets in the UK. This legal action, in our view, represents the voice of reason and humanity and the importance of the rule of law, as well as the importance to respect and adhere to the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed, and I'll let you turn off your video and we'll pass over to Siobhan.
Thank you, Garoud, and thank you, Ahmed. So as you've heard, in the coming days, we will be filing a case against the UK government at the English High Court, asking the court to order the government to suspend all licenses for the sale of arms to Israel. UK law provides that where there's a clear risk of UK weapons being used in international law violations, the government must suspend arms licenses. We first wrote to the government on the 16th of October, asking them whether they had suspended licenses and whether they intended to do so. We set out clearly the law that applies to their decision-making and the already mounting evidence of war crimes Israel was committing in its onslaught on Gaza. We've written to them numerous times since, flagging the increasing and escalating violations of international law by Israel. We've also submitted a Freedom of Information request, asking them to disclose what information they have about their decision-making about these licenses. We've pointed out that as the situation escalated, an increasing number of international experts urgently sounded the alarm that we may be witnessing a genocide of the Palestinian people. We reminded the government that their duty under the Genocide Convention, which they have signed up to, is to take all action they can to prevent genocide where there's a serious risk of it occurring. We asked again whether they were going to suspend licenses. We've made very clear from the outset that if we didn't get a satisfactory response, we were fully committed to pursuing this to court. The government has failed to answer our questions. We've received only holding responses. They haven't given a date by which they would even propose to answer our questions. However, they have confirmed to media outlets and in open parliament that they have no plans to stop arms exports to Israel. In the time we've been waiting for a response from them, over 15,000 people in Gaza have been killed. As we've set out in the evidence we're filing with the court, we've witnessed indiscriminate and disproportionate bombing that is flattening Gaza and killing a captive population in unfathomable numbers. We've witnessed attacks directed at civilians, hospitals, and schools. A siege that is starving and strangling the population of Gaza, and the denial of humanitarian aid to suffering civilians. Collective punishment is illegal. We've heard warnings that we may be witnessing a second Nakba, the forcible displacement of the Gazan population, and genocide. We've heard representatives of the Israeli state openly indicating their intention to commit and continue to commit these actions. These actions have been publicly and loudly condemned by virtually every organ of the United Nations, the International Committee for the Red Cross, and humanitarian and legal organizations worldwide. Let us be clear, the law demands that as soon as there is a clear risk of UK weapons being used in war crimes, the government is required to suspend arms licenses. As soon as there's a serious risk that genocide might occur, the government is required to take action to prevent that. It's overwhelmingly clear on the evidence that we have that we've long passed this threshold of risk. It's utterly untenable and irrational for the government to conclude that no such risk exists and continue to allow arms sales to Israel. The government is in breach of its legal obligations here in the UK, and we intend to hold them to account on that before the court. The conduct of Israel is so serious that we're asking the court for an expedited timetable for the case and to make a mandatory order instructing the government to suspend licenses, something that's uncommon in judicial review.
Thank you, Siobhan. And now we'll pass over to Laura Chowdhury from ICJP.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. We're very glad at ICJP to be able to support GLAN in this absolutely crucial challenge to the UK government on its outrageous and reprehensible policy of continuing to issue licenses for the sale of British weapons to Israel, particularly in light of the clear evidence of mass atrocity crimes currently being committed in Gaza. There is clear evidence of almost every possible war crime being committed right now. And many of these are being committed as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Gaza, and therefore may also amount to crimes against humanity. There's also credible evidence, as Siobhan and Ahmed have said, that Israel's actions in Gaza now may amount to the crime of genocide. At the very least, there is a serious risk of genocide already having been committed. The UK has duties under the Genocide Convention to take all reasonable measures to prevent genocide from taking place. A number of different organizations have now said that there's a plausible and credible case based on powerful factual evidence that Israel is attempting to commit, if not actively committing, the crime of genocide in the OPT, and specifically against the Palestinian population in Gaza. As a state party to the Genocide Convention, the UK must refrain from not only taking an active part in the crime of genocide, but must prevent the commission of genocide by others using all means reasonably available and within its power. And this obligation arises as soon as the state is aware that there is a real risk that genocide might occur. The UK is now on notice. A number of different organizations have alerted the UK and the international community to the risk of genocide, including the Centre for Constitutional Rights, UN Special Rapporteurs, Al-Haq, Al-Mizan, and PCHR, and a number of genocide scholars have also released a statement warning of this. But not only is the UK government failing to prevent genocide, but it is likely to be actively complicit by continuing to supply weapons to Israel in its ongoing assault on the people of Gaza. So we've had recent media reports that there may be that the UK is currently using the RAF military base in Akrotiri in Cyprus and may be facilitating arms supplies to Israel in its war on Gaza. The UK government has taken the very unusual step, according to the recent media reports, of blocking MPs from asking any questions about any activity currently taking place at the military base. We believe that the government has to be much more transparent and open about what's happening, not only at the military base, but in terms of its ongoing export licenses to Israel, particularly in light of its ongoing and serious mass atrocity crimes. The British government has to take its obligations seriously and hold Israel accountable. For decades, Israel has benefited from complete impunity from the international community, and I think that we can see this current situation as a result of this lack of impunity, this total impunity, and the lack of accountability that the international community has placed on Israel. And we call on the government to take action immediately to suspend all its licenses and to hold Israel accountable for its obligations under international law. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And now we'll pass over to Katie Fallon from Campaign Against the Arms Trade. Katie, we're not picking you up on audio. You're muted.
Sorry. Turned on my camera, but not my mic. Okay, so I'll just begin again. My name is Katie Fallon. I'm Advocacy Manager at Campaign Against Arms Trade, also known as CAT. Thank you, Al-Haq and GLAN, for inviting us here to speak today. We're a UK-based organisation working to end the international arms trade, and our priorities are to stop the export of arms where they exacerbate conflict, support an oppressive regime, or break international law. Firstly, I just want to offer my solidarity to everyone who's been personally affected and who has lost loved ones in the latest cycle of war and bombardment. For the people of Gaza in particular, they've been living through a globally sanctioned hell on earth for almost 2 months. The numbers of people who've been killed in such a short space of time is staggering, and in addition to the fact that nearly half are children. The humanitarian catastrophe, the siege, and the dehumanization of Palestinian people. All of these problems are man-made. Israel, from the outset, when talking about the UK's arms exports to Israel and the bombardment of Gaza, one thing that I think is important to highlight here is that we're seeing the intersection of 2 different issues. Firstly, our government's indefensible political position on Israel and Palestine, where crimes committed by Israel, violations of international law, or war crimes are repeatedly ignored, even supported, as we've just seen, and also how that crosses over with the weakest possible implementation of the UK's arms export regime, particularly as it applies to political allies. Neither of these issues came into being this October, and they are not new to this cycle of violence. CAT has long been calling for a two-way arms embargo with Israel in response to bombardments and ensuing crimes in 2008 and 9, in 2012, in 2014, 2018, 2021, and 2022. Since May 2015, this Conservative government has licensed at least 472 million worth of military exports to Israel. And the true figure is actually much higher because of the government's secretive open license system. We provide approximately 15% of the components that go into the F-35 stealth bomber aircraft, which is currently being used to bomb Gaza. Companies that provide these components include BAE Systems, Martin Baker, Dunlop Aircraft Tires, Coban Mission Systems, and Leonardo and Rolls-Royce, so many familiar names. In recent years, the government's been purposely vague and evasive when answering questions in relation to the use of UK-made arms in Palestine and Gaza. In 2014, a review found that 12 licenses for arms were very likely to have been used in a brutal 50-day bombardment that killed 2,000 Palestinians. At the time, Vince Cable, who was the business secretary, said that the government had not been able to clarify if the export licensing criteria was being met. And in light of that uncertainty, they took the decision to suspend those licenses. So there's very much precedent for suspension of licenses. There have been long-standing calls from many organizations outlining our concerns, outlining the violations of international law. I think it's just such an important thing to emphasize that this is not a new situation as of this October, and all of these issues are long-standing.